Welcome to Front Office Pros. I'm Steve, and this is Joe. And today we have a special guest, the original Papa John, not known for pizza, but it's Joe's grandfather. John, so excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Very exciting, John. In another video, we have to hear about your story when it comes to fantasy football. It's quite fascinating. You were here before the internet. Well, actually, that's rude. Of course, you were here before the internet. But you used to do fantasy football with the newspaper in the mail. So that's another story for another day. But we're going to be talking about starts and sits. This is the first time we're going to be doing starts and sits. But we're going to do it a little bit differently than what you may be accustomed to. Instead of saying you should just start or sit a player, we're going to tell you whether or not the player is a more of a ceiling play. What does that mean? If you're chasing points this week, if you're the underdog, you might want to play this player because he could have a breakout game. Or we have a floor play. Is that player is going to, get a bankable 10, 15 points that you could feel comfortable. You're going to get that points. Or we may say just flat out sit the player. And if we do, we'll bring up some players that we think you could put in your starting lineup instead of that player. So we're going to go 3 players at each position: quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end. So let's start off with quarterback. We're going to go with Tua against the Detroit Lions at Detroit. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's a definite start this week, Steve. I think he's a solid ceiling play. I mean, he's got the great matchup against the Lions. They're just usually a sieve on defense. I mean, should get some big plays to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So I like his ceiling this week. I mean, could also be somewhat of a floor play, but I think ceiling's probably a better spot for him.
I tend to agree with Joe. I think actually he's going to have a very good ceiling. Hopefully the game doesn't get away and Mostert takes over and they just tend to run. But with Hill and Waddle, I think Tua getting a game under his belt last week, and it's inside in Detroit. I think he's going to have a nice high ceiling.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys. I think he's a clear ceiling play. He's got those yak machines in Waddle and Hill. As we've seen the past few games, Detroit as their defense is a sieve. They let up a huge amount of fantasy points. You might not have started Tua obviously while he was out. You weren't starting him. You may not have been starting him week in, week out. I think this is a time to put him into your lineups. I think he could be a good floor play too. I think he's more ceiling, but I like his matchup for sure. All right, let's go to the next player. Our next player is quarterback Daniel Jones. He's at Seattle. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I like taking a shot on Daniel Jones this week against Seattle. I think whether or not he's a ceiling or floor play, Steve, I think he's a good floor play. I don't know if I'd call him a ceiling play, but I think he's going to have a solid game, can kind of continue on what he's been doing. He's going to be utilized, get you the rushing yards as well in this game. But Seahawks defense, I know it's on the road, tough place to play, but their defense really doesn't scare me. I look for him to have a solid game this week.
I agree with Joe. I think it's a good floor play. In fact, last week was any indication, he can go off. And Daboll's doing a good job of play calling, keeping things relatively simple, working Barkley into the passing game. I'd say a safe floor play. Floor. I didn't say foreplay, Joe.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. And middle of the road, definitely a good floor play.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. We got some consensus here so far. I think it's a floor play. And if you're struggling, let's say you have Aaron Rodgers, he's going up against Buffalo, or you have Tom Brady going against Baltimore. They obviously have had some shaky weeks. Seattle has been, again, known to let the opposing quarterback have a really good day. He's got that rushing upside. So I feel like if you are worried and you don't want to get a donut from either Brady or Rodgers or even Russell Wilson, he's been shaky. Him going to London against Jacksonville. I think Daniel Jones is a good floor play. He's not going to have that ceiling that a Brady or Rodgers or Wilson could get you if they go off. But if you want to be safe, I think Daniel Jones is a good floor play for this week.
Yeah, he could have a higher ceiling though if that game gets into a bit of a shootout with Geno Smith on the other side. I mean, we'll see, but Giants defense has been pretty good. So,
all right, our last play we're going to talk about for quarterbacks is Matthew Stafford. He's going to go against the San Francisco 49ers at home. What do we think, Joe?
Yeah, I think he's just going to be a floor play. I mean, could be safe. I mean, 49ers defense is tough. I mean, I could see people wanting to sit him, but I just picked him up and going to use him in a league out of pure necessity. But I do think, possibly Kyron Williams, Van Jefferson may be playing, could jumpstart that offense. Obviously, nobody's been able to stop Cooper Kupp. So I think he could be a solid floor play start, even though he's going up against the tough 49ers defense.
Yeah, I agree. I agree probably more with the sit-em. Cooper Kupp seems to be the only thing there with Stafford. And Stafford has done nothing close to what everybody thought. I mean, it might be a Super Bowl hangover, but I would avoid him. And I understand why you picked him up, Joe.
Hey, coming off a bye, maybe they get something going. That's why I'm taking the shot on him.
Yeah, I'm kind of with John on this. I would sit him. I think, like I mentioned, I would much rather Daniel Jones would probably, a waiver wire pickup in your redraft leagues. Obviously, in Dynasty, you'd already have him. But if it was me, I would start him instead of Stafford. I think Stafford going up, he's been shaky already this year. I was already concerned about his shoulder and kind of the reports out there with him. He's had, you might be right. It might be a Super Bowl hangover, John. Maybe, Joe, you do have a good point as well. They may, with the bye week, they may have, kind of did some things that could help that team. That Niners defense is pretty good. So that's just not the team I'd want to bet on for Stafford. So if it was me, I would sit him. Now, John, you also mentioned you said, I'm going to give you a few names. You tell me if you'd rather start them over Stafford. What about Geno Smith? Would you play Geno Smith?
Well, Metcalf being out or potentially out this week, one big weapon for Geno. I would start Stafford.
Okay, so it's Geno against the Giants. You'd rather start Stafford. Okay, yeah. What about Lawrence against Denver in London?
No, for two reasons. It's in London, hasn't produced a lot of offense in years past. Denver's defense has been phenomenal against wideouts. I just think that Trevor Lawrence is going to struggle in this game against the Broncos D.
Okay, I'm going to give you a few others then, because it sounds like you're thinking more of a floor play here based on your responses. How about Jared Goff against Miami, Derek Carr at New Orleans, or Jimmy G at the Rams? Any of those guys you take over Stafford?
I like Jimmy G. I do. I think that if it gets into a back and forth touchdown game, which I don't think that's going to happen, but there's a lot of weapons that Jimmy G has now, especially having McCaffrey. Could be Jimmy G becomes a real prominent ceiling guy as the season goes on. We're early in the season. We're still shaking things out. I haven't figured out this year yet. Trying to, but I like Jimmy G in that one.
Okay, so John is on the fence between whether you should sit him or you should, or he's a floor play. I like some of those other options better. But let's go to our next position group. Let's start off with the running backs. We've got Rhamondre Stevenson. He's going up at the Jets. He's been really good these past few weeks. Najee Harris is starting to get healthy. That Jets defense has been stout. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think Stevenson's definitely a floor play. I don't expect him to have a big game. Like you mentioned, the front four of the Jets has been really dominant this year, but it's just one of those games where kind of like, to me, if the Broncos could score a rushing touchdown, Rhamondre Stevenson should be able to. So if he falls into the end zone, I think he's going to be a solid floor play this week. But Patriots run game's been pretty good as well. So I think he's a solid floor play. I'd still start him.
Yeah, I definitely would start him. I agree with Joe. Damian Harris, I think he's coming back this week, but it's going to be iffy. Rhamondre's shown that he can be the bell cow and get a lot of touches. I'd say almost he might have a low ceiling. And they may work him into the passing game a little bit. I like him as definitely a high floor play.
See, I think he's a floor play for me. I almost would be kind of tempted to sit him, to be honest with you. But I would say low floor play. My reason being is you never know with Belichick what he's going to do. They got embarrassed last week against the Bears. I know Rhamondre Stevenson has been a really good player, but I just, with Damian Harris starting to get healthy, you never know. Something could crazy that could happen. I know you don't think so. And then the other thing for me is that Jets defense kind of gets me concerned. I think he's a floor play, but if you've got guys like Mostert going up against Detroit, or even a Pollard against Chicago, I don't know. That's kind of interesting, especially with Zeke Elliott. He may be out for that game. That'd be a tough decision. I could see how some owners could be back and forth about that.
I would like Mostert over Stevenson. I just think that game could get out of hand, and they try and really work the running game in. But yeah, I'd say he has a high floor, Stevenson. We'll see. Belichick does have good game plans, except for last week.
Yeah, well, as last week shown, I don't think Belichick's going to let Mac Jones just sit back there and throw the ball, Steve, even with a tough run defense. Stevenson's going to get the bulk of the carries, I think. Damian Harris last week was involved, not that much, didn't look that great. Stevenson definitely looked like the better back. I'm not worried about him.
All right, our next player, this guy has been a frustration for many owners this season. We've got Najee Harris in Philly. Joe, what do you think? Eagles defense has been tough this year.
I think Philly's defense has been tough. It's just it's tough to sit the guy, but if I had better options, I would sit him. But I do think he's potentially, still a low floor play. He's another guy. I know he hasn't gotten involved much in the pass game, but maybe they pass it to him a little more because they could be down in this one, trying to come back. And then again, I mean, if he gets another touchdown like he did a couple weeks ago, he got one of those receiving touchdowns. If he's able to score a touchdown, then he'll have a decent game. But I don't expect big things from Najee this week.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I have multiple shares of Najee Harris. I coveted him. I can't take him out of the lineup because of that. I expect him at some point to be the Najee from last year. Don't give up. Definitely a floor play, but he's not coming out of my lineup. You can't.
Yeah, at some point, John, you might be a sunk cost for you. I got him from you, so I have to start thinking about it myself. But what I'll say for me is I think it's a floor play. If you look, he gets around 20 touches a game. That doesn't fall off trees. Not every running back gets that level of volume. So that alone should make him a safe floor play. But I want to press in a little bit with what you were saying, Joe, because I do agree the defense is tough. And if I had other options, I would consider it, because now that they just got Robert Quinn, that's another element to that defense that was already doing very well. You said you'd sit him. I'm gonna throw out a couple names. Would you start Michael Carter against the Patriots? I mentioned Tony Pollard against the Bears, Singletary against the Packers, or Aaron Jones against the Bills. Any of those guys you take over Harris?
Well, I mean, obviously, definitely Aaron Jones, but I still think it depends on. So, as you mentioned at the top of the show here, if you're looking to really say you're behind in the matchup, projected to lose, you need a max amount of points, and a floor play just isn't good enough for you. I think taking a flyer on like a Tony Pollard, like you mentioned, against the Bears, or even Michael Carter against the Patriots. You saw the Bears have success running the ball on them last week. So maybe those guys are a little higher ceiling plays in my opinion.
Okay. No, that's fair. I agree. I don't think Najee is not going to give you that ceiling. So if you're going to be chasing the points, I think that's a smart decision. All right, our last player for the running back group, we got David Montgomery at Dallas. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think this is again, if I've got better options, I'm not playing Montgomery. Khalil Herbert's getting a little more involved. He's looking pretty good. Again, Dallas is one of the top defense against the run this year. They're really hard overall defense to face. And then I just don't know how committed the Bears are to David Montgomery. Khalil Herbert, right from the jump in the offseason, said better fits this run game and the run system that they have in Chicago. So he's a bit concerning to me, even though he looks good. I know he did get a touchdown against the Patriots, but with Herbert's involvement, again, if I had better options, I would bench him.
Yeah, I agree with Joe. I think this game could get out of hand and Fields ends up throwing the ball, and that benefits Darnell Mooney. And we're talking about Montgomery here, but and Khalil Herbert is obviously, I almost think that if you were to redraft, you'd take Khalil Herbert over David Montgomery. And Dallas defense is good. Game could get away from him, and then it'll become a passing game for the Bears.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I agree. I would sit Montgomery. I think the Dallas defense has been pretty stout this year. And like you said, the involvement with Herbert and really that offense, the Bears offense has mostly struggled throughout the season. So I'd rather sit him. Let's go through a few options. Let's see what you would if you'd start him over. Would you start these guys over Montgomery? We got Tyler Algier versus Carolina. Jamal Williams, we're assuming that Swift doesn't play. Jamal Williams versus Miami. Gus the Bus Edwards at Tampa Bay, or would you play Antonio Gibson in Indianapolis? Any of those guys you'd start over Montgomery?
I think I'd be willing to definitely play Gus Edwards.
I agree.
Tyler Algier is an interesting one. I just don't know. Atlanta uses all three backs there. He really just needs a touchdown to be fantasy relevant. Jamal Williams is also interesting. I mean, when he's in there for, as long as he's hanging onto the ball and not fumbling, cost fantasy owners a touchdown last week. He's a solid play. So I would say out of those options, I think I'd go Williams. And then don't forget the last guy.
What about Gibson?
I don't trust Gibson.
Do you trust Brian Robinson? Would you start Brian Robinson over him?
Said they're playing the Colts.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I like Robinson.
Okay, so you would start Robinson, but you wouldn't start Gibson over Montgomery.
Yeah.
What about for you, Jen?
I think tend to agree with Joe. Jamal Williams over Edwards. Just those two, Algiers and.
So you would take Williams and Edwards over Montgomery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's go to the wide receiver group. First off, we've got Michael Pittman. He just got a new quarterback with Sam Ehlinger. How we feeling about him going against the Commanders?
Yeah, I mean, I'm nervous about him, but I'm still playing him this week. I think, he's definitely not a ceiling play. He's a solid floor play. The Commanders defense doesn't scare me at all. And I think as long as Ehlinger can hit those underneath throws with time, I mean, his one knock on him is that he potentially doesn't throw the ball down the field. And that is not Michael Pittman's game at all. So I like him as a solid floor play this week.
Yeah, I agree with Joe. I agree too much with you, Joe. It's nice to see a change there in Indianapolis. Matty Ice just wasn't the answer. I hate to see that happen. You get these quarterbacks that go somewhere and you expect them to be reborn, just not happening, especially when I have shares of Michael Pittman, who probably was a top 5 wideout going into the season, I would think, after last year. I would say he's a solid play. With Ehlinger, he could have a breakout game and be something special. I think that's what they're hoping for. And maybe Pittman is the guy that they target most, even though the other receivers are working in there with the Colts. but I like him as I can't take him out of my lineup. A solid floor with potential low ceiling.
Yeah, see, I'm sitting him. I'm nervous about Ellinger coming in. Maybe I'm hitting the panic button and I'll regret it. But some other players that I'd rather start over him, I think, are either good ceiling plays or a better floor than him. I like Amari Cooper. He's been having a really solid rapport with Brissett. I like him versus Cincinnati. I also like Devonta Smith versus Pittsburgh. I like let's see what other guys I like here. I like Brandon Cooks versus Tennessee. I think they might be able to right the ship. I know he hasn't had that good of a season. I like him better. I think he could have a better ceiling. So a couple guys I like. Adam Thielen versus Arizona. Arizona's pass defense has been brutally bad, coming off a bye. Could see him getting more involved in the offense. So those are a couple names in my mind that I would rather play than Michael Pittman.
You're nuts, Steve.
Why am I nuts?
Come on, Brandon Cooks over Michael Pittman? No way. No way.
All right, we'll see if I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But hey, it's a situational game, and I don't think I think we'll see. We'll see who scores more, Cooks or Pittman, and we'll talk about it next week.
Sounds good, Steve.
All right. Next player, Christian Kirk versus Denver. What do you think, Joe? In London.
Yeah, I'm not playing Christian Kirk. I'm sitting him, man. If he's got Surtain on him, Surtain locks everybody down, doesn't allow good games for wide receivers to happen. The Broncos defense is not the problem. It's their offense is inept. They have a solid defense. I think you can do better than Christian Kirk this week. I'm sitting him.
Yeah. Christian Kirk is making so much money, and he's not getting a dollar for dollar value at all. I sit him this week, and I am sitting him this week. Denver's
putting your money where your mouth is, John. I like it.
Denver has allowed one passing touchdown to wide receivers this year, and that's just phenomenal. And Jacksonville's not going to. If they do, it'll be a hiccup, and it won't be to Christian Kirk. Sit him.
Yeah, see, I don't know. Joe, you'll be able to speak to this more, so I'm going to ask you a question before I give my answer. But I believe Kirk a lot of times is in the slot, and I thought Surtain usually is kind of more on the outside. Does he play against the slot against or their best receiver?
Yeah, I think early on they were playing a lot of zone. And you could kind of take advantage of him just solely playing on the outside. But I think kind of recently they've been mixing in more where he just kind of shadows their number one. But if they do play his own, there is a chance where if Kirk's on the inside, sometimes a team will put the running back on the outside. Surtain will actually take the running back, and then a linebacker is going to be on Christian Kirk. I don't know, like if teams, I haven't noticed that as much. The Raiders were doing that exclusively. Haven't noticed as many teams trying to do that and exploit the matchup. So tough to say there.
Yeah, so I would, in my opinion, I would say he's a floor play. He is heavily involved in that offense.
Kwan Williams is a fine corner out of the slot too, Steve. Even if he does play the slot, and
I get that
Kwan Williams, then
I get that. But Trevor Lawrence looks his way a lot. He gets targeted. That team is going to need to. Well, I mean, they may not have to score that many points, but I still like his involvement in the game. Tell me I'm crazy here, but I would rather play Kirk instead of Pittman this week.
Oh, come on, Steve. That is just crazy.
Crazy.
All right, we'll see what happens.
Real quick, I think it's now the Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne show there. That's going to be it. Etienne's going to line up. He may line up in the slot. He may line up wide. And now that Robinson's gone, if I could just get Etienne back on my roster.
Yeah, well, sorry, John. That was a good trade on my part for getting him from you. But we'll go to our last player, wide receiver, Alan Lazard, Sunday night in Buffalo. What do you do, Joe?
Yeah, I'm sitting Lazard this week. The shoulder concerns me. The Bills defense has also been pretty stout, and I don't see Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers being able to exploit the defense. Maybe, I don't know how close this game is going to be, so maybe garbage time, if Lazard does play, I don't know. I'm concerned about Allen Lazard even suiting up and playing this week. Shoulder injury really took him out of that game last week, and then you saw a lot more Sammy Watkins towards the end. So, yeah, I'm staying away from Lazard this week.
Yeah, if you remember Aaron Rodgers, was it 2 years ago? He said, relax. I mean, he's looking at this game as proving ground for the Packers. And I think it's a big mistake. I think the Bills just, they have, even though Trey White's not coming back this week, which forces them to make him come back next week if he's going to play at all. I wouldn't start. Maybe Aaron Jones would be a low floor, but Allen Lazard, they'll be keying on him and Aaron Jones. They want to shut them down, and Rodgers is not getting any younger.
Real quick, would you start any of the Packers receivers this week?
Me?
Yeah, both of you.
No. And like Joe said, unless it's garbage time and the game's out of hand and the Bills put their second string in and they pick up something, but it won't come to that, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a real desperate situation, and I think maybe Sammy Watkins.
That's what I was thinking, possibly for the revenge game. I don't know. Maybe that's the revenge game narrative isn't that great, but
yeah, I don't know about the revenge game, but just the way that he hyper targeted Sammy Watkins towards the end of last week, and if it does come to garbage time, he could be that guy he's looking to. He was looking to Tunyon and really him towards the end of the game last week, so maybe that continues. And Watkins is one of those guys that out of the wide receivers they do have right now that can probably get open with a good route. So
yeah, so for me, I also sit him. There's a couple players I would start over him. I would start Jacoby Myers, even though he's got a tough matchup at New York, possibly Sauce Gardner's got him. It doesn't matter to me. I just don't. I would, like you said, I kind of like even the possibility. If you're going to throw a dart throw, the dart throw to me, I would rather throw my dart with Sammy Watkins than Lazard at this point.
Yeah, if you're in a dire need, but I don't know, Steve. If Sauce Gardner's on Myers, I don't like him this week. That guy's not letting up anything right now.
So transitioning over to the tight end group, we've got John, your favorite player, tight end Kyle Pitts against the Panthers. We'll start with you, John, because I know how much you like Pitts. What do you do with Pitts?
I love him. Nobody else does. Nobody. One touchdown this year, and that I didn't see the game, but it must have been like an afterthought. Why this guy is not catching and getting 10 targets a game and finding the end zone at least once a game is beyond me. And
Mariota's only throwing 13 passes.
No, it's true. But something's got to change there. But it may be one of those tight ends that his career, we were so high hoped for, that he just rides off into the sunset and be a low auction bid of $10 or a 12th rounder. This year, I think the high hopes for him were off the charts, and I'm paying the price.
So for the record, you're sitting him this week.
I don't have much of an option myself. You have to, if you place that much of a premium on him in your draft, a redraft, Pitts is well down my list. He's a low floor. If I have another option, I'm probably going to start over Pitts. Watch him have a breakout week this week.
Yeah, at the moment, I think you got to sit Pitts and kind of wait and see, and maybe wait for the breakout game. If it happens, I guess if it happens and he's on your bench, you got to be encouraged for maybe the future going forward. But I think I think I'd be willing to take a flyer on a Greg Dulcich over Kyle Pitts. There's some other interesting tight ends I'd potentially rather take a flyer on than continue with the disappointment of Pitts at this point.
Yeah, so for me, I would, maybe you guys can think I'm nuts. I actually consider him a ceiling play only because of his talent. I mean, I believe that there may be a game. It may not be throughout the entire season, but I would like to believe that will be proved. The fantasy community at large will be proved right for at least one game, and you never know what game that's going to be. So with the tight end group being as bananas as it's been, I have him. I traded for him, and I have him in another league. And at this point, I view him as, hey, I don't expect much from you, but if you do go off, I'll be extremely happy. So that's the way I look at it. But you guys both said six. Let me throw out some names here. Would you start any of these players over Kyle Pitts? We got tight end Robert Tonyan at Buffalo, Dawson Knox versus Green Bay, or Dalton Schultz versus Chicago.
Any of them.
You play all three of them over Pitts.
Yeah. Pitts has played, 24 games in the NFL? And how many of them have been a breakout game? And you're saying he's a ceiling. Sample size is pretty huge, Steve. For you to go ceiling on Pitts is just stunning to me.
Well, I think he's saying he's a ceiling play just because of his talent and ability, not so much what he's shown.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, his talent and ability has not gone away. It's been 24 games, and he hasn't shown. Kyle Pitts is on my Christmas shopping list. Regifting. I'm going to regift him.
What about you, Joe? Would you start Tonyan, Knox, or who's the other guy? Dalton Schultz over him?
Yeah, I would be fine starting Schultz or Tonyan. I would start Pitts over Knox though.
Do you think Knox would be an interesting play though, just because coming off the bye, obviously you'd heard he had the touchdown, and even some of the Bills players kind of had mentioned that, with his brother's passing, he was kind of dealing with some mental health type of, issues, kind of working through that. Do you think possibly after the bye, could we see him get more involved?
Yeah, definitely could. I don't know. We haven't seen too much of him so far this year. He definitely could. And then Packers defense, doesn't scare me that way either. He could have a good game, but I don't know. It'd be tough for me if I had Dawson Knox and Kyle Pitts to put Knox over him.
Yeah, I'm starting Knox. I think, if anything, has shown the team, the Buffalo Bills are definitely a team, and they rally around Dawson Knox. You saw when he caught the touchdown the other week that it seemed like even people on the sideline, the Bills players on the sideline, wanted to greet him. It's a rallying team about every player. And yeah, I'm starting Knox over Pitts in a heartbeat.
All right, so let's go to the next player. This probably was a top waiver wire pickup in your leagues. If you drafted him, you probably drafted him maybe in later rounds. But tight end Greg Dulcich, again in London at Jacksonville. Joe, what do you do there?
At this point, he's potentially, I'd say he's a kind of a high floor, maybe a low ceiling type of guy. He's definitely got the ability to have that big play as he's shown against the Chargers for the down the field touchdown. But he's just a guy that's been getting a decent amount of targets last couple of games, didn't matter with the two different quarterbacks. And he's still somewhere, I think, right around 60, 70 yards with like 4 catches or something. So yeah, I think he's a solid play this week for sure.
I agree. Safe floor for me. Just a real safe floor. I don't know about low ceiling, but came out of nowhere. And like Steve said, everybody's snatching him off the waiver wire. Just a safe floor for me.
See, I consider him a ceiling play personally because I think he could not be involved in the offense, or he could get heavily targeted and have like you mentioned, Joe, I was thinking about that long touchdown. I mean, we've seen Hackett's offense, at least so far, it seems like there are a lot of plays where they're involving the tight end. And so to me, obviously you had some of those other they're not no-namers, but for most, other than Joe and other Broncos fans, you wouldn't know who Beck is. But to me, I think that I like him. I really do. I think he's a good ceiling play. I don't know if I wouldn't say floor because I'm not positive that he gets the targets and the output, but I could see him breaking out.
I mean, in back-to-back games though, he's kind of gotten the target share. And like I said, it didn't matter if it was Brett Rippon or Russell Wilson. So, that's why I kind of considered him a floor / possible ceiling play.
All right, so our last player is tight end George Kittle. He's going up against at the Rams. What do you think, Joe?
I mean, George Kittle. I mean, you're not going to sit the guy. I mean, he definitely is a ceiling play at the tight end position. I could see there's a lot of options in the 49ers offense. Sometimes they utilize him. I mean, he's another guy kind of like Pitts, hasn't always gotten the touchdowns. I know he got one last week, but some games there are Kittle games and other games kind of goes towards Debo or Ayuk's of the world. So that's why I think he's a ceiling play for sure.
This could be game script. If the Rams get a decent lead, and G's got to throw the ball around, Kittle's going to be the beneficiary. He's a high ceiling play, as anybody would be in that script if it gets out of hand and they start winging the ball around. If you have Kittle on your lineup on your team, you never bench him. You just ceiling every week in, week out.
See, I don't know if I'd agree with that, John. I mean, these obviously the past 2 weeks he's really performed very well, but before that, he was in a stretch where he was doing very poorly.
That was disarray with the quarterback, Lance going down. They had to retool it. And I know last year with Jimmy G there all year, they shouldn't have had to do a major retooling, but it's come around. The 49ers adding this new part to the team. I don't know if it's going to cause more problems than it's worth by adding McCaffrey.
That's also why he's a ceiling play, Steven. Where you drafted him, he's saying you just play him. He could have one of those breakout games for you, like he's kind of shown the last couple of weeks. But then, as you mentioned early in the season, he could be kind of disappointing, and that's why I kind of view him as a high ceiling type player because he isn't the most consistent guy, but he has the ability at any point, depending on if they look his way, to really be a good ceiling play for you on any given week.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I agree with you. I think he's a ceiling play, but I got to tell you, I'm looking at some of the players that would be available if you had him on your bench to start, and I'd be almost inclined to start some of these other guys over him. Like if you had Pat Freiermuth or TJ Hawkinson,
you're starting TJ Hawkinson over Kittle. Come on now. He had one good week.
Going against Miami, Joe, with possibly Josh Reynolds out, DJ Chark's out. The options at that offense is limited. That's why he had that crazy game, because there was nobody to throw the ball to. I mean, he's a good player too. I'm just saying situationally, the Rams are a tough defense, right? I mean, with Wagner in the middle. I don't know, Joe. I've got I don't know. I'd be debating that one. That one is not a lock for me.
I mean, if you drafted Kittle and have him, you're not benching him, especially you're really gonna take a flyer on Hawkinson over George Kittle. That's nuts.
The only guy that might be able to outperform Kittle this week is Mark Andrews, and it's because Kelsey's not playing this week. Freiermuth I put well down the list. Hawkinson,
really.
Hey, come on, he's going against the Eagles.
Yeah, Hawkinson would be higher.
I'm not worried about that.
Than Freiermuth for sure.
What about Higbee? Would you play Higbee over Kittle?
No, never.
Joe, I might have stumped you there.
Well, Higbee doesn't have the same ceiling that Kittle has,
but he's got the floor.
I wouldn't. He definitely got the floor because there's only two guys at the moment we've seen actually do well for the Rams, and that's been Kupp and Higbee.
I play Higbee over Kittle.
All right. Well, you like the safe guys and you like the floors. Man, I want that ceiling. I want to be scoring a lot of points on a game.
Hey, I am not the only one. John likes floor plays too.
I do. I don't see Higbee getting the targets that Kittle's going to get. There's no way he outperforms Kittle. No way.
Well, that was
go back and review everything after this is all said and done.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll have some outtakes for sure. So that was 3 players from each position, quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, that we told you whether or not we would start or sit and whether or not we think that possibly they could be a ceiling or floor play. John, thanks so much for joining us. Do you have any final words for our audience?
Yeah, I'm just glad the internet's here and I don't have to mail out results every week.
Yeah, that was something else, and we definitely got to have you come back on to share about that, because that is definitely something else. So with that, that goes through our starts and sits. We ask you to subscribe to this channel. Please hit that notification bell, like this video. We're trying to create videos on a weekly basis, and this is exciting stuff, and we want you to be involved. If you have any comments that you want to ask us, who you think we should start or sit, whether you agree or disagree with us, put it in the comment section below, and we'd be happy to answer. And until next time.